The dust from the cattle stirred up in thick clouds as Willa Lawson swung herself down from her saddle, her legs aching from 6 hours of hard riding across the Arizona Territory range. She was 22 years old, newly arrived in Seligman, and already beginning to question whether taking a job as a ranch cook at the Double R Ranch had been the smartest decision of her life, especially when the foreman, Marcus Webb, looked at her like she was something he could purchase at the general store. The year was 1882, and Seligman was still rough around the edges, a railroad town that had sprung up along the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad line just a couple of years prior. The settlement consisted of little more than a handful of buildings scattered across the high desert landscape, where the sun beat down mercilessly during the day and the temperature dropped like a stone at night. Willa had come west from Kansas after her father died, leaving her with nothing but debts and the clothes on her back. Her mother had passed when she was young, and with no siblings and no prospects, heading to Arizona Territory to answer a newspaper advertisement for a ranch cook seemed like the only option available. She had expected hard work. What she had not expected was Marcus Webb. The foreman was a tall man with slicked-back dark hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. From the moment Willa arrived at the Double R 3 weeks ago, he had made his intentions clear. He wanted her, and in his mind, what Marcus Webb wanted, Marcus Webb got. He was the second most powerful man on the ranch, answering only to the owner, Mr. Randolph, who was an elderly widower more interested in his whiskey than in the day-to-day operations of his cattle operation. Willa had rebuffed Marcus's advances politely at first, then more firmly, and finally with outright rejection. But the foreman was not a man accustomed to hearing the word no. "Miss Lawson," Marcus's voice cut through the evening air as Willa made her way toward the ranch house kitchen. Heading in to start supper, she did not slow her pace. "That's what you pay me for, Mr. Webb." He fell into step beside her, his boots crunching on the gravel. "I was thinking you and I might take a ride into town Saturday evening. There is a dance at the church hall." "I appreciate the invitation, but no thank you." Willa kept her eyes forward, her shoulders squared. "Now, that is the third time you have turned me down," Marcus said, and there was an edge to his voice that had not been there before. "A woman in your position should be grateful for the attention of a man like me." Willa stopped walking and turned to face him directly. "A woman in my position is here to cook meals and earn an honest wage, Mr. Webb. Nothing more. I am not looking for attention from anyone." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You think you are too good for me?" "I think I am not interested in courting anyone right now," Willa said, keeping her voice level despite the anger building in her chest. "I have made that clear." "We will see about that," Marcus muttered, but before Willa could respond, he turned on his heel and strode away toward the bunkhouse. Willa watched him go, unease settling in her stomach like a stone. She had dealt with forward men before, but something about Marcus Webb felt different. There was a possessiveness in the way he looked at her, as though he had already decided she was his, and it was only a matter of time before she realized it too. She pushed the thought aside and headed into the kitchen, where she spent the next 2 hours preparing beef stew and biscuits for the ranch hands. The work was familiar and comforting, and she lost herself in the rhythm of chopping vegetables and stirring the pot over the cast iron stove. The hands filed in for supper just as the sun was setting, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. They were a rough bunch, mostly young men looking to make their fortune in the cattle trade, but they had been respectful toward Willa. They thanked her for the food, ate quickly, and headed back out to their evening chores. Marcus was the last to enter. He took his plate without a word, but his eyes lingered on Willa in a way that made her skin crawl. She busied herself with cleaning up, hoping he would eat and leave. Instead, he sat at the long wooden table and took his time, chewing slowly, watching her work. "You know, Miss Lawson," he said finally, "a woman alone out here in the territory needs protection, needs a man to look after her." Willa did not turn around. "I can look after myself, Mr. Webb." "Can you?" There was amusement in his voice now, and it set her teeth on edge. "This is not Kansas. The desert is not kind to those who do not know its ways." "Then it is a good thing I am a quick learner." Marcus stood, his chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. He crossed the kitchen and set his empty plate beside the wash basin, close enough that Willa could smell the tobacco on his clothes. "You will come around," he said quietly. "They always do." He left before she could respond, and Willa let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. That night, she lay in the small room off the kitchen that served as her quarters, staring at the ceiling and wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. She needed this job. Without it, she would have nowhere to go and no means to support herself. But the thought of enduring Marcus Webb's advances day after day made her stomach turn. She had to find a way to make him understand that she was not interested, that she would never be interested, no matter how much he pushed. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the sun already warming the desert by the time Willa had breakfast ready for the hands. Mr. Randolph himself made a rare appearance, shuffling into the kitchen with bleary eyes and reaching for the coffee pot. "Morning, Miss Lawson," he mumbled. "Fine biscuits yesterday." "Thank you, sir," Willa said, pouring him a cup. "Are you feeling well, old bones?" he said with a dismissive wave. "Nothing a little whiskey will not fix." Willa did not comment. It was not her place to tell the ranch owner how to live his life, even if she could see that the bottle was slowly killing him. Marcus appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Randolph, I need to speak with you about moving the herd to the north pasture." "Later, Webb," the old man grumbled. "Let me have my coffee first." Marcus's eyes flicked to Willa, and she saw something in them that made her pulse quicken. He was planning something. "Actually, sir, there is another matter," Marcus said smoothly. "About Miss Lawson." Willa's hand stilled on the pan she was scrubbing. "What about her?" Mr. Randolph asked, sounding annoyed. "I think it would be appropriate if Miss Lawson and I were to formalize our arrangement," Marcus said. Willa spun around. "Our what?" "I have been courting Miss Lawson, and I believe it is time we made our intentions known," Marcus continued, ignoring her outburst. "With your blessing, sir, I would like to marry her." "I have not agreed to any such thing." Willa's voice rose, anger flooding through her. "We are not courting, Mr. Webb, and I have certainly never agreed to marry you." Mr. Randolph looked between them, confusion evident on his weathered face. "Now hold on. Is this true, Miss Lawson? Have you been courting my foreman?" "Absolutely not," Willa said firmly. "Mr. Webb has asked me out several times, and I have refused him every single time. I have no interest in courting him or anyone else." Marcus's expression darkened. "She is just being modest, sir. Women often are about such matters." "I am not being modest, I am being honest," Willa snapped. "I do not want to court you, Mr. Webb. I do not want to marry you. I want you to leave me alone so I can do my job." "Miss Lawson, there is no need to be hysterical," Marcus said, his voice condescending. "I am not hysterical, I am angry." Willa slammed the pan down on the counter. "You cannot simply decide I am going to marry you and expect everyone to go along with it." Mr. Randolph held up a gnarled hand. "Now, both of you, calm down. Webb, if the lady says she is not interested, then that is the end of it." "Sir, with all due respect, Miss Lawson does not understand what is best for her," Marcus said. "A woman needs a husband, needs someone to provide for her. I am offering her a good life." "A good life doing what exactly?" Willa demanded. "Obeying your every command." I came here to work, not to be some man's property." "That is enough." Mr. Randolph's voice cracked like a whip and both of them fell silent. "Webb, get back to work. Miss Lawson, finish preparing breakfast. We will discuss this later when cooler heads prevail." Marcus shot Willa a look that promised the conversation was far from over, then strode out of the kitchen. Willa's hands were shaking as she turned back to the stove. She felt Mr. Randolph's eyes on her. "He has been bothering you, has he?" the old man asked quietly. "Yes, sir," Willa admitted. "I have tried to handle it myself, but he will not take no for an answer." Mr. Randolph sighed heavily. "Marcus is a good foreman, knows cattle, knows the land, but he has always had a problem understanding that people are not livestock to be corralled." He paused. "I will speak with him. Make sure he knows to keep his distance." "Thank you, sir." But even as Willa said the words, she knew it would not be enough. Men like Marcus Webb did not give up just because someone told them to. They pushed and pushed until they got what they wanted, or until someone pushed back harder. Over the next few days, Marcus kept his distance, but Willa could feel his eyes on her whenever she was outside. He watched her from across the yard, from the bunkhouse porch, from his horse when he rode past. The attention was suffocating. On Saturday morning, Willa decided she needed supplies from town. She also needed to get away from the ranch, even if only for a few hours. She asked one of the younger hands, a boy named Tommy who could not have been more than 17, to hitch up the wagon for her. "You sure you want to go alone, Miss Lawson?" Tommy asked, his freckled face creased with concern. "It is a fair distance and the road can be rough." "I will be fine," Willa assured him. "I have been driving wagons since I was younger than you." The ride into Seligman took just over an hour, the wagon bumping along the rutted dirt road that served as the main route between the ranch and town. The landscape was stark and beautiful, all red rock and scrub brush beneath an endless blue sky. Willa found herself relaxing for the first time in days, enjoying the solitude and the gentle rhythm of the horse's hooves. Seligman was busy when she arrived, the main street crowded with wagons and riders. The railroad had brought commerce to the area, and the town was growing fast. Willa tied up the wagon outside the general store and headed inside, her shopping list clutched in her hand. She was examining a bolt of fabric when she heard the door open and turned to see Marcus Webb walk in. Her heart sank. He must have followed her. "Miss Lawson," he said, tipping his hat. "What a coincidence running into you here." It was not a coincidence, and they both knew it. "Mr. Webb," she replied coolly, turning back to the fabric. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his body in the cramped store. "I thought perhaps we could have lunched together. The hotel has a decent dining room." "No, thank you, Willa." His hand closed around her wrist, not hard, but firm enough that she could not easily pull away. "You are being unreasonable. Let go of me." Willa kept her voice low, aware of the other shoppers around them. "Not until you agree to have lunch with me." The lady said, "Let go." The voice came from behind them, deep and rough as gravel. Willa turned her head and found herself looking at the broadest chest she had ever seen, covered in a worn leather vest over a flannel shirt. Her eyes traveled up to a face that was all hard angles and sun-bronzed skin, framed by dark hair that fell past his shoulders. His eyes were a startling shade of blue-green, like the sky just before a storm, and they were fixed on Marcus with an intensity that would have made a lesser man step back. This was not a lesser man, though. This was something else entirely. He stood well over 6 feet tall, his shoulders so wide they seemed to block out the light from the window behind him. His arms were corded with muscle, visible even through his shirt sleeves, and his hands looked like they could snap a man's neck without much effort. There was something wild about him, something untamed, as though he had walked straight out of the mountains and into the store. Marcus did not release Willa's wrist. "This is none of your concern, stranger. I am making it my concern." The mountain man took a step forward, and suddenly the store felt very small. "The lady asked you to let go. I suggest you do it." "And I suggest you mind your own business," Marcus shot back, but Willa could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. The mountain man did not say anything else. He just stared at Marcus with those storm-colored eyes, his massive frame radiating a quiet menace that needed no words. Marcus held on for another few seconds, then released Willa's wrist as though it had burned him. "This is not over," he muttered, then pushed past the mountain man and out of the store. Willa rubbed her wrist, her heart hammering. "Thank you," she said, looking up at her rescuer. "I appreciate your help." Up close, she could see the details she had missed before. He had a scar along his right jaw, faded white against his tanned skin. His nose looked like it had been broken at least once. There was gray threaded through the dark hair at his temples, suggesting he was older than her, though she could not say by how much. Maybe 30, maybe more. But there was a strength in his face that had nothing to do with age and everything to do with a life lived hard and survived. "That man going to be a problem for you?" the mountain man asked, his voice softer now but no less intense. "He works at the ranch where I am employed," Willa admitted. "He is the foreman. He has been persistent in his attentions." The mountain man's eyes narrowed. "Persistent like he does not understand the word no." Exactly like that. He was quiet for a moment, studying her. Willa found herself wondering what he saw. Did he think her foolish for taking a job at a remote ranch? Did he think her weak for not being able to handle Marcus on her own? "Name is Cade Barrett," he said finally, extending a hand that dwarfed hers when she took it. His palm was rough with calluses, but his grip was gentle. "I have a place up in the mountains west of here. Come into town for supplies every few weeks." "Willa Lawson," she replied. "I am the cook at the Double R Ranch." "Randolph's place." Cade nodded. "Heard of it. Good cattle operation, or it was before Randolph took to the bottle." "You know Mr. Randolph?" "Know of him. Been in these parts about 5 years now. You hear things." Cade released her hand and stepped back, giving her space. "That foreman of his, the one who just left, he lay hands on you often." Willa hesitated. She did not know this man, had no reason to trust him beyond the fact that he had intervened when Marcus would not let go. But something about Cade Barrett made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since arriving in Arizona territory. "Not often," she said carefully. "Today was the first time he actually grabbed me. Mostly he just will not accept that I am not interested in him." "Man like that does not understand the meaning of no," Cade said, echoing his earlier words. "Thinks the world owes him whatever he wants." "That is an accurate assessment." Cade was quiet again, and Willa could see him thinking, weighing something in his mind. "You got someone looking out for you at that ranch?" he asked finally. "Not really. Mr. Randolph said he would speak to Marcus, but I do not think it did much good." "Probably not." Cade crossed his arms over his broad chest. "Listen, Miss Lawson. I know we just met, and you got no reason to trust me. But if that foreman gives you trouble again, you come find me. My cabin is about 3 hours west of Seligman, up in the foothills. Follow the main road toward Prescott and take the second trail north after you cross the creek. Big pine tree marks the turn. Anyone in town can tell you where I live." "I could not ask you to get involved," Willa protested. "This is my problem to solve." "You are not asking, I am offering." Cade's expression was serious. "I spent too many years seeing folks get pushed around by men who think might makes right. Does not sit well with me." There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience, old wounds that had never quite healed. Willa found herself wanting to know more about this mysterious mountain man who had appeared out of nowhere to defend her. "Thank you, Mr. Barrett," she said quietly. "I hope I will not need to take you up on that offer, but I appreciate it. Just Cade." He tipped his head toward her. "And you be careful around that Foreman. Men like him, when they do not get what they want, they sometimes take it anyway." The words sent a chill down Willa's spine, but she nodded. "I will be careful." Cade held her gaze for another moment, then turned and headed toward the back of the store where the hardware supplies were kept. Willa watched him go, struck by the way he moved. For such a large man, he was surprisingly graceful, each step deliberate and sure. He reminded her of the big cats she had read about in books, all coiled strength and controlled power. She finished her shopping quickly, paid for her goods, and headed back out to the wagon. Marcus was nowhere to be seen, and she was grateful for that. The encounter in the store had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. The ride back to the Double R seemed shorter than the ride in, though Willa could not say why. Perhaps it was because her mind was occupied with thoughts of Cade Barrett and his offer of help. She found herself hoping she would see him again. Even as she told herself, it was foolish to think about a strange man she had met for all of 10 minutes. When she arrived back at the ranch, Tommy helped her unload the supplies. "Mr. Webb was looking for you," the young hand said as he carried a sack of flour into the kitchen. "Seemed pretty mad that you had left." "He knows I needed supplies," Willa said, keeping her voice neutral. "Yeah, but I think he wanted to go with you." Tommy set the flour down and gave her a worried look. "Miss Lawson, if you do not mind me saying, you should be careful around Mr. Webb. Some of the boys have been talking and they say he has set his sights on you. When Marcus Webb sets his sights on something, he usually gets it." "Not this time," Willa said firmly. She spent the rest of the afternoon preparing supper, trying not to think about Marcus or the confrontation that was surely coming. When the hands filed in to eat, Marcus was not among them. "Foreman rode out about an hour ago," one of the older hands informed her. "Said he had business in town." Willa felt a mix of relief and unease. Had Marcus gone back to Seligman to look for her, only to find she had already left? Or was he doing something else entirely? She found out the next morning. Willa was kneading dough for biscuits when Marcus walked into the kitchen, his face set in hard lines. "I heard you had an interesting encounter in town yesterday," he said without preamble. Willa did not look up from her work. "I do not know what you mean." "Some mountain man interfered in our conversation at the general store." "There was no conversation. You grabbed me, I told you to let go, and Mr. Barrett helped me when you would not listen." "Mr. Barrett." Marcus's voice dripped with contempt. "You mean Cade Barrett, that hermit who lives up in the hills like an animal." "I would not know about his living situation," Willa said, punching the dough harder than necessary. "I only know he understood the meaning of the word no, which is more than I can say for you." Marcus crossed the kitchen in 3 quick strides and slammed his hand down on the counter beside her, making her jump. "You listen to me, Willa Lawson. I have been patient with you. I have been respectful, but my patience is wearing thin." Willa set down the dough and turned to face him, flour dusting her hands and apron. "Respectful? You call refusing to accept my clear refusal of your advances respectful? You call grabbing my wrist in the store respectful? I call offering you marriage and security respectful," Marcus shot back. "Do you have any idea how many women would kill for the chance to marry a man like me? I am the foreman of one of the biggest ranches in the territory. I make good money. I can provide for you." "I do not need you to provide for me," Willa said, her voice rising. "I provide for myself. I have a job, I earn my own wage, and I do not need a husband, especially not one who treats me like property." "You are a woman," Marcus said flatly. "Women need husbands. That is just the way the world works. Then maybe the world needs to change. Marcus's eyes flashed with anger. You think that mountain man is going to save you. You think Cade Barrett is some kind of hero. Let me tell you something about him. He is a drunk and a brawler who got run out of every town between here and Denver. He lives alone in the mountains because no decent person wants anything to do with him. At least he understands what no means, Willa retorted. The slap came so fast she did not have time to duck. Marcus's palm caught her across the cheek, snapping her head to the side and sending her stumbling backward against the counter. Pain exploded across her face, and she tasted blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. For a moment, there was absolute silence in the kitchen. Then Marcus seemed to realize what he had done. "Willa, I did not mean get out." Her voice was low and dangerous, her hand pressed to her burning cheek. "You made me do that," Marcus said, but he sounded uncertain now, almost frightened. "If you had just listened, get out of my kitchen right now, or I will take the cast iron skillet to your skull." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. Willa stood there shaking, her cheek throbbing, tears of anger and pain streaming down her face. She had been afraid before, but now she was terrified. Marcus had crossed a line, and she knew it would only get worse from here. She could not stay at the Double R. She had to leave, had to find somewhere else to go. But where? She had no money saved, no connections in town, nowhere to run. Except Cade Barrett's words echoed in her mind. "If that Foreman gives you trouble again, you come find me." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of flour across her face. It was crazy. She barely knew the man, but he had offered help, and right now he was the only person in Arizona territory who had. Willa finished making breakfast on autopilot, her mind racing. When the hands came in to eat, she kept her head down, hoping no one would notice the red mark on her cheek. Tommy gave her a concerned look but did not say anything. Marcus did not come to breakfast. As soon as the dishes were washed and put away, Willa went to her room and packed her few belongings into a canvas bag. She had 2 dresses, a change of underclothes, a hairbrush, and the $20 she had managed to save from her wages. It was not much, but it was everything she owned in the world. She found Mr. Randolph in his study, a glass of whiskey already in his hand despite the early hour. "Sir, I need to speak with you," Willa said from the doorway. The old man looked up and his eyes widened when he saw her face. "What in blazes happened to you?" "Your foreman happened," Willa said bluntly. "He hit me this morning when I refused his advances for the final time." Mr. Randolph's face darkened. "Marcus did that?" "Yes, sir, and I am giving you my notice. I cannot work here anymore, not with him around." The ranch owner set down his glass heavily. "Now hold on. You are a damn fine cook, Miss Lawson, best we have had in years. Let me talk to Marcus, set him straight. With all due respect, sir, talking is not going to fix this." Willa touched her cheek gingerly. "He thinks he has a claim on me and he is not going to let it go. I need to leave before things get worse." Mr. Randolph looked pained. "Where will you go?" "I will figure something out." Willa squared her shoulders. "I would appreciate it if you could pay me what I am owed for this week." The old man nodded slowly and pulled a cash box from his desk drawer. He counted out bills and handed them to her. "I am sorry, Miss Lawson. I should have handled this better from the start." "Yes, sir, you should have." Willa tucked the money into her pocket. "Thank you for the work." She left the study and headed for the barn, where she found Tommy mucking out stalls. "Tommy, I need to borrow a horse," she said quietly. The young hand looked up, startled. "What? Why?" "I am leaving the ranch." "I will make sure the horse gets back to you, but I need transportation to get where I am going." Tommy's eyes went to the bruise on her cheek, and his expression hardened. "Mr. Webb do that?" "Yes." "Take Daisy," Tommy said immediately, jerking his head toward a sweet-tempered bay mare in the corner stall. "She is gentle and sure-footed. You bring her back when you can, or do not. I would rather lose a horse than see you get hurt worse." "Thank you, Tommy." Willa squeezed his shoulder. "You are a good man." She saddled Daisy quickly, tied her bag to the saddle horn, and rode out of the double R without looking back. It was not until she was a mile down the road that she allowed herself to cry, hot tears streaming down her face as the reality of her situation hit her. She was alone in the Arizona territory with nothing but the clothes on her back, a borrowed horse, and the vague directions to a mountain man's cabin. She was either about to make the smartest decision of her life or the stupidest. Only time would tell. The ride to Cade Barrett's cabin took longer than 3 hours because Willa got turned around twice trying to find the second trail north after the creek. The sun was past its zenith by the time she finally spotted the big pine tree Cade had mentioned, its branches spreading wide over the narrow path that led up into the foothills. The trail was steep and rocky, winding through scrub brush and juniper trees. Daisy picked her way carefully, and Willa was grateful for the mare's steady nature. As they climbed higher, the landscape began to change. The desert scrub gave way to pine forest, and the air grew cooler, scented with resin and earth. She almost missed the cabin entirely. It was set back from the trail, tucked into a small clearing surrounded by tall pines. The structure was sturdy and well-built, constructed from logs that had been stripped and fitted together with obvious skill. A stone chimney rose from one end and smoke curled from it, indicating someone was home. Willa dismounted and tied Daisy to a hitching post near the cabin, her heart hammering. Now that she was here, doubt flooded through her. What was she doing? She barely knew this man. What if he was not what he seemed? What if the cabin door opened and Cade Barrett stepped out? He was even bigger than she remembered, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. He was not wearing his vest, just the flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms roped with muscle. His hair was tied back with a strip of leather, and he held a rifle loosely in one hand. When he saw her, his expression shifted from wariness to concern in an instant. "Miss Lawson." He set the rifle against the cabin wall and crossed the clearing in a few long strides. "What happened to your face?" Willa's hand went automatically to her bruised cheek. "I took you up on your offer," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "The foreman. He hit me." Cade's jaw clenched and something dangerous flickered in his storm-colored eyes. "He hit you." "It was not a question. This morning. I told Mr. Randolph I was leaving, collected my pay, and came here. I am sorry to impose, but I did not know where else to go." "You are not imposing." Cade's voice was rough with barely contained anger. "You did the right thing coming here." He studied her for a moment, then gestured toward the cabin. "Come inside. You look like you are about to fall over." Willa followed him through the door and stopped, surprised. She had expected a rough bachelor's dwelling, all dirt and disorder. Instead, the cabin was clean and well organized. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a cooking pot hanging from an iron hook. A handmade wooden table and 2 chairs occupied the center of the room, and a narrow bed was tucked into the far corner, covered with what looked like a bearskin. Shelves lined the walls, holding supplies and equipment. Everything had its place. "Sit," Cade said, pulling out one of the chairs. "I will get you some water." Willa sank into the chair gratefully, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The adrenaline that had carried her through the morning was fading, leaving her shaky and wrung out. Cade handed her a tin cup filled with cold water from a bucket by the door. She drank it gratefully, and he refilled it without being asked. "Thank you," she said softly. He pulled the other chair around and sat facing her, his knees almost touching hers in the small space. "Tell me what happened, all of it." So Willa told him. She started with Marcus's first advances, his refusal to accept her rejections, the scene in Mr. Randolph's kitchen, the encounter at the general store, and finally, that morning's confrontation that had ended with Marcus slapping her. Cade listened without interrupting, but Willa could see the fury building in him with every word. His hands, resting on his thighs, slowly curled into fists. The muscles in his jaw worked as he ground his teeth together. When she finished, there was a long silence. "I should have done more than just get him to back off in the store," Cade said finally, his voice low and tight. "I should have made sure he understood what happens to men who hurt women." "You could not have known," Willa said. "And honestly, I am grateful you did not start a fight in town. That would have just made things worse." "Would it?" Cade looked at her, and there was something fierce in his expression. Maybe if more men faced consequences for their actions, they would think twice before laying hands on a woman. Willa did not have an answer for that. She set down her cup and wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling the full weight of everything that had happened. "I do not know what to do now," she admitted. "I cannot go back to the ranch. I do not have enough money for a train ticket back east, and even if I did, there is nothing for me there. I have no family, no prospects." She laughed bitterly. "I came to Arizona Territory to start fresh, and here I am, 2 months later, homeless and unemployed." "You are not homeless," Cade said firmly. "You can stay here." Willa's head snapped up. "I could not possibly. Why not?" He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "I have got space. The cabin is small, but I can rig up a partition to give you privacy. I hunt my own meat, grow a few vegetables in a patch out back. It is not fancy, but it is safe, and that foreman of yours does not know where I live." "But people would talk," Willa protested. "A single woman living with a single man, people talk anyway," Cade interrupted. "And frankly, I do not give a damn what folks in town say about me. Never have." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "But if you are worried about your reputation, we could ride into Seligman and find you a room at the boarding house. I will pay for it until you can get on your feet." The offer was generous, incredibly so, but the thought of going back to town made Willa's stomach clench with anxiety. Seligman was only an hour from the Double R. Marcus could find her there easily. "I think I would feel safer here," she said quietly. "If you are serious about the offer." "Serious as a heart attack." Cade stood and crossed to the far side of the cabin where a coil of rope hung on a peg. "I can string this across the cabin here, hang some blankets to make you a private space. The bed can be yours. I will sleep by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Willa said, standing as well. "You can and you will." Cade's tone brooked no argument. "I have slept in worse places than a bedroll on the floor." He began stringing the rope, his movements efficient and sure. "There is a stream about 50 yards east of here where you can wash up and get fresh water. Outhouse is behind the cabin. I hunt most days, so there will be fresh meat. I make a decent stew, but I will not lie and say I am much of a cook." "I can cook," Willa offered. "It is what I did." She corrected herself. "I can earn my keep that way at least." Cade glanced at her over his shoulder. "You do not need to earn anything. You are a guest, not a hired hand." "I need to do something," Willa insisted. "I cannot just sit around and let you take care of me. That is not who I am." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. You can cook if it makes you feel better, but this is not a job, Willa. This is me helping someone who needs help. Nothing more, nothing less." The way he said her name with that rough, gentle voice made something flutter in her chest. She pushed the feeling aside. This was not the time to develop foolish feelings for a man she barely knew, no matter how kind he was being. Cade finished stringing the rope and pulled several thick wool blankets from a trunk in the corner. He hung them over the rope, creating a makeshift wall that divided the cabin roughly in half. The bed and one of the shelves were on Willa's side, while the fireplace and table remained on his. "It is not much," he said, stepping back to survey his work, "but it will give you some privacy." "It is perfect," Willa said, and she meant it. The gesture was thoughtful, more than she had expected. "There is a trunk at the foot of the bed with some extra blankets and such," Cade continued. "Help yourself to whatever you need. I am going to go tend to your horse, make sure she is settled." He left before Willa could thank him again, the door closing softly behind him. Alone in the cabin, Willa moved to her partitioned space and sat on the edge of the bed. The bearskin was incredibly soft under her fingers, and the mattress, though simple, was stuffed with something that gave it a comfortable density. She could smell pine and smoke and something else, something earthy and masculine that must be Cade himself. She lay back on the bed, staring up at the log ceiling, and for the first time since leaving the Double R that morning, she felt the tight knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. She was safe. At least for now, she was safe. Over the next few days, Willa and Cade fell into an easy routine. She woke early and made breakfast, using the supplies Cade had on hand and improvising when necessary. He ate quickly and headed out to check his trap lines or hunt, leaving her alone in the cabin to do as she pleased. At first, Willa was restless. She was not accustomed to so much solitude. At the ranch, there had always been work to do, people coming and going. Here in the mountains, the silence was profound, broken only by the wind in the trees and the occasional call of a bird. But gradually, she found herself relaxing into it. She explored the area around the cabin, discovering the stream Cade had mentioned and spending an afternoon washing her clothes and bathing in the icy water. She found the vegetable patch behind the cabin, a small plot that held tomatoes, beans, and squash in various stages of growth. She weeded it carefully, enjoying the feel of the sun on her back and the dirt under her fingernails. Cade was a man of few words, but Willa found she did not mind. When he was there, he was fully present, listening when she spoke and offering thoughtful responses. He was nothing like the men she had known back in Kansas or the ranch hands at the Double R. There was a calmness to him, a groundedness that came from living alone in the wilderness for years. On the third evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Willa worked up the courage to ask the question that had been nagging at her. "Why do you live up here alone?" she asked. "If you do not mind me asking." Cade was carving a piece of wood, his large hands surprisingly deft with the small knife. He did not look up. "Prefer the company of trees to people, mostly. But you must have lived in towns before. You must have had a life somewhere else." He was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the scrape of the knife against wood. "I did," he said finally. "Had a wife once, Sarah. We lived in Colorado, had a small ranch, raised horses." Willa's breath caught. He had been married. "What happened?" "Raiders happened." Cade's voice was flat, emotionless. "Group of men came through, looking to steal whatever they could find. I was out on the range when they hit the ranch. By the time I got back." He trailed off, but he did not need to finish. The pain in his eyes told Willa everything she needed to know. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "It was 8 years ago." Cade set down the carving and the knife, staring into the fire. "I tracked them down, every last one. Took me 2 years, but I found them. And I made sure they never hurt anyone else." He said it without inflection, a simple statement of fact. "After that, I could not go back to Colorado, too many memories. So I came here, bought some land, built this cabin. Been here ever since." Willa understood now. The solitude was not just preference, it was protection. Cade had loved and lost, and he had chosen to live in the mountains where his heart could not be broken again. "Do you ever think about leaving?" she asked softly. "Going back to civilization?" "No." The answer was immediate and certain. "Everything I need is here. Peace, quiet. No one asking questions or making demands." "Until I showed up," Willa said with a rueful smile. Cade looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "You are different. How so?" "You did not ask to be here. You needed help, and I offered." "That is different from the world shoving itself into my business." He picked up the carving again. "Besides, you are good company. Quiet when you need to be, but you know how to hold a conversation, and you make a hell of a stew." Willa laughed, surprised. High praise from a mountain man. "I do not give praise I do not mean." They fell into comfortable silence again, and Willa found herself studying Cade's profile in the firelight. His face was all hard planes and sharp angles, weathered by sun and wind and years of living rough. But there was a gentleness in the way he moved, a carefulness that spoke of a man who was aware of his own strength and chose to temper it. She realized, with a start, that she felt safe with him in a way she had never felt safe with any man before. It was not just physical safety, though that was part of it. It was the sense that Cade saw her as a person, not as a possession or a prize to be won. He had given her shelter and asked for nothing in return. He respected her space, her privacy, her autonomy. It was, she reflected, everything Marcus Webb was not. A week after her arrival at the cabin, Willa was gathering eggs from the small chicken coop Cade kept when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. She straightened, her heart leaping into her throat. Had Marcus found her? But when the rider came into view, it was Tommy from the Double R, looking dusty and worried. "Miss Lawson." He dismounted quickly, relief evident on his young face. "Thank God I found you." "Tommy, what are you doing here?" Willa set down her basket of eggs. "Is everything all right?" "No, madam, it is not." Tommy glanced nervously at the cabin. "Is Mr. Barrett here?" As if summoned by his name, Cade emerged from the tree line, a brace of rabbits in one hand and his rifle in the other. He took in the scene quickly, his eyes narrowing when he saw Tommy. "What is going on?" Cade asked, his voice hard. "Mr. Barrett, sir," Tommy started, then seemed to lose his nerve under Cade's intense gaze. He turned back to Willa. "It is Mr. Webb. He has been tearing the ranch apart looking for you. He fired 2 of the hands for refusing to tell him where you went, even though they did not know. Mr. Randolph tried to stop him, but he is too drunk most of the time to keep control. Mr. Webb is talking like he owns the place now. What does he want with Miss Lawson?" Cade's voice was dangerously quiet. "He keeps saying she belongs to him, that she has no right to leave." Tommy twisted his hat in his hands. "He came to me yesterday, asked if I knew where you had gone. I told him I did not know, which is not exactly a lie since I only guessed you might have come here. But he did not believe me. He hit me, said he would keep hitting me until I told him the truth." Willa's hands flew to her mouth. "Tommy, I am so sorry. I never meant for anyone else to get hurt." "It is not your fault, Miss Lawson." Tommy's voice was fierce. "Mr. Webb is the one who is wrong, but I had to warn you. He is asking questions in town, trying to find out where Mr. Barrett lives. Someone is bound to tell him eventually." Cade muttered a curse under his breath. He turned to Willa. "Get inside. Now." "Cade, inside, Willa, please." There was something in his voice that made her obey without argument. She picked up her basket and hurried into the cabin, but she left the door open a crack so she could hear. "How long before he finds this place?" Cade asked Tommy. "I do not know, sir. Maybe a few days. Maybe less if he offers money for information. There are folks in town who would sell out their own mothers for the right price." I need you to do something for me, Cade said. Can you do that? Yes, sir. Anything. Ride back to town and find the marshal. Tell him there is a man making threats against a woman, that she is in danger. Get him to come out here. Tommy hesitated. The marshal, he does not much like getting involved in disputes between men. He might say it is not his problem. Then you make him understand it is his problem, Cade said, his voice like iron. A man who hits women is everyone's problem. You tell him that if he does not do his job, I will handle it myself, and it will not be pretty. Yes, sir. Tommy mounted his horse. I will do my best. Good man. Cade watched him ride off, then turned and walked into the cabin. Willa was standing by the fire, her arms wrapped around herself. He is going to come here, is he not? Probably. Cade set down the rabbits and his rifle, then crossed to where Willa stood. But he is not going to hurt you again. I promise you that. I do not want you getting hurt because of me, Willa said, her voice shaking. Maybe I should just leave, go somewhere else. Where? Cade interrupted. Where would you go that he could not follow? Men like Webb, they do not give up. They keep pushing until someone pushes back harder. So what do? We wait, Cade said. And if he shows up here, I make sure he understands that you are under my protection now. Your protection. Willa looked up at him. Why are you doing this for me, Cade? You do not even know me. He was quiet for a moment, his storm-colored eyes searching her face. I know enough, he said finally. I know you are strong and brave enough to leave a bad situation even when you had nowhere else to go. I know you are kind because you have been nothing but gracious about living in my rough cabin when you are used to better. And I know that you did not deserve what that bastard did to you. He paused. And maybe I see something of Sarah in you, not in how you look or act, but in your spirit. She was independent too, fierce about keeping her own identity. I could not protect her when she needed it. Maybe helping you is my way of making up for that. Willa felt tears prick her eyes. You cannot save everyone, Cade. No, he agreed, but I can save you. The next 2 days passed in tense anticipation. Cade stayed close to the cabin, his rifle always within reach. Willa tried to keep busy with cooking and cleaning, but her nerves were stretched tight, jumping at every sound from the forest. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, the sound they had been dreading finally came. Hoofbeats, multiple horses approaching fast. Cade was outside chopping wood when he heard them. He set down the axe and picked up his rifle in one smooth motion. Willa, stay inside, he called. But Willa ignored him. She stepped out onto the small porch, her heart hammering, and watched as 4 riders emerged from the trees. Marcus Webb led the group, his face twisted with anger. 3 ranch hands from the Double R flanked him, all of them armed. There you are, Marcus said, his eyes locking on Willa. I have been looking everywhere for you. You need to turn around and leave, Cade said, stepping between Marcus and the cabin. Miss Lawson is not going anywhere with you. Marcus's gaze shifted to Cade and his lip curled. The mountain man, I should have known, you always did have a weakness for strays. Last warning, Cade said, his voice deadly calm, get off my property. Or what? Marcus dismounted and his men followed suit. You will shoot me. There are 4 of us and 1 of you. Even a big dumb animal like you should be able to do that math. Cade, please, Willa said, fear flooding through her. Just let me go with him. I do not want you to get hurt. Not happening, Cade said without taking his eyes off Marcus. Marcus took a step forward. Willa, you have caused me a lot of trouble, but I am willing to forgive that if you come back to the ranch with me right now. We can get married, settle down, put all this nonsense behind us. I am not going anywhere with you, Willa said, her voice stronger than she felt. I do not want to marry you, Marcus. I never did. You need to accept that. I do not think you understand your situation, Marcus said, his tone turning nasty. You have no job, no money, no family. You are living in the mountains with a man you barely know. People are already talking, saying you are nothing better than a whore. If you come with me now, I can make that go away. I can make you respectable again." "I would rather be a whore than your wife," Willa shot back, and she saw Marcus's face darken with rage. "You ungrateful," he started toward the porch, but Cade moved to block him. "That is far enough." Marcus shoved Cade's shoulder. "Move aside, Barrett. This is between me and my woman." "She is not your woman," Cade's voice was ice. "She has never been your woman. She is her own person, and she has made her choice clear. Now you need to leave. Make me." It happened so fast Willa almost missed it. Marcus swung a fist at Cade's face, but the mountain man ducked under the blow and drove his shoulder into Marcus's midsection, lifting him clear off the ground and slamming him down onto the dirt with enough force to knock the wind out of him. The three ranch hands moved forward, but Cade was already back on his feet, his rifle leveled at them. "I do not want to shoot anyone," Cade said, "but I will if I have to. This stops now." One of the hands, an older man Willa recognized as being decent and fair, held up his hands. "We did not sign on for this, Webb," he said, looking down at Marcus, who was struggling to breathe. "You said we were just going to talk to the lady." "She is coming back with us," Marcus wheezed, pushing himself up onto his hands and knees. "She belongs to me." "She does not belong to anyone but herself," Cade said. The rifle did not waver. "And if you cannot get that through your thick skull, then you are stupider than you look." Marcus climbed to his feet, his face red with humiliation and rage. "You think you have won. You think this is over." "I think you need to leave before this gets worse for you," Cade said. "Mr. Webb, let us just go," one of the other hands said nervously. "This is not worth dying over." For a moment, Willa thought Marcus might charge at Cade anyway, consequences be damned. But then something shifted in his expression, a calculation that was almost worse than the rage. "Fine," Marcus said, brushing dirt from his clothes. "We will leave. But this is not over, Barrett, not by a long shot." He turned to Willa. "And you are going to regret this. When you are starving in the mountains with nothing but this brute for company, you are going to wish you had come with me." "I would rather starve," Willa said quietly. Marcus's face contorted with fury, but the three hands were already moving back to their horses, clearly eager to be gone. With one last venomous look at both Willa and Cade, Marcus mounted up and rode away, his men following close behind. Cade did not lower the rifle until they were out of sight. Then he turned to Willa, and she saw that his hands were shaking slightly. "Are you all right?" he asked. Willa nodded, then shook her head, then burst into tears. Cade leaned the rifle against the cabin wall and pulled her into his arms. She went willingly, pressing her face against his broad chest and sobbing out all the fear and tension she had been holding in for days. His arms came around her, strong and protective, and she felt safer than she had in weeks. "I am sorry," she gasped between sobs. "I did not mean to fall apart." "You are not falling apart," Cade said, his voice rumbling in his chest. "You are just letting go of what you have been holding in. That is not weakness, Willa. That is strength." They stood like that for a long time, Willa crying and Cade holding her until finally her tears subsided and she pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she said, "for everything. For standing up to him, for protecting me. I do not know what I would have done if you had not been there." "You would have figured something out," Cade said, his hand coming up to gently cup her unbruised cheek. "You are tougher than you think." Willa looked up at him, at this mountain man with his scars and his long hair and his storm-colored eyes, and felt something shift inside her. This was not gratitude, though she felt that too. This was something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. She was falling for Cade Barrett. The realization should have terrified her. She had sworn off men after Marcus had told herself she did not need anyone. But Cade was different. He had shown her respect, kindness, protection without possession. He had given her space when she needed it and comfort when she asked. He had stood up for her right to choose her own path, even when it put him in danger. How could she not fall for him? "Cade," she started, but before she could finish, the sound of more hoofbeats interrupted. Cade grabbed his rifle again, positioning himself in front of Willa. But this time, it was Tommy who emerged from the trees, accompanied by a portly man wearing a tin star on his vest. "Mr. Barrett," Tommy called out, clearly relieved to see them both unharmed. "I brought Marshal Tate." The marshal dismounted with a grunt, eyeing Cade warily. "Tommy here tells me there is some trouble between you and Marcus Webb over a woman." "Not over a woman," Cade corrected. "A woman is not property to be fought over. Webb has been harassing Miss Lawson, refusing to accept her rejection of his advances. He hit her. Then he showed up here with armed men to try to force her to go back with him." Marshal Tate turned to Willa. "Is this true, madam?" "Yes, sir," Willa said, stepping out from behind Cade. "Mr. Webb hit me at the Double R Ranch last week. I left my position there and came to stay with Mr. Barrett for my own safety. Today, Mr. Webb arrived with 3 ranch hands and tried to force me to return with him." "Did he threaten you?" "He said I belonged to him and that I would regret not going with him." The marshal sighed heavily. "I know Marcus Webb. He is not an easy man, but threats and harassment, those are serious matters." He looked at Cade. "And you, Barrett, you lay hands on Webb." He swung first, Cade said flatly. "I defended myself and Miss Lawson. That is all." Tommy nodded vigorously. "That is the truth, Marshal. Mr. Webb has been acting crazy ever since Miss Lawson left the ranch. He fired 2 hands for no reason, and he hit me when I would not tell him where she went." Marshal Tate rubbed his face tiredly. "This is turning into a damn mess." He looked at Willa. "Miss Lawson, do you want to press charges against Marcus Webb for assault?" Willa hesitated. Part of her wanted to say yes, wanted to see Marcus face consequences for what he had done. But another part of her knew that pressing charges would drag everything out, would keep her tied to Marcus and his anger for months while the legal system ground through its processes. "I just want him to leave me alone," she said finally. "I do not want to go back to the ranch. I do not want to see him again. I just want him to accept that I am not interested and move on with his life." "I can make that happen," the marshal said. "I will ride out to the Double R and have a talk with Webb. Make it clear that if he comes near you again, he will be arrested. Will that work for you?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." Marshal Tate nodded, then turned to Cade. "And you, Barrett. I know you like to keep to yourself up here, but if Webb comes back and you kill him, I will have no choice but to arrest you." "Understood, understood," Cade said. "But if he comes back and tries to hurt Willa, I will do what I have to do to protect her." The 2 men stared at each other for a long moment, and Willa held her breath. Then the marshal nodded slowly. "Fair enough. Just try not to make my job harder than it already is." He remounted his horse. "I will send word once I have talked to Webb. In the meantime, you 2 stay out of town for a while. Let things cool down." He rode off, and Tommy lingered just long enough to return Daisy, whom he had brought with him from the ranch. "Your horse, Miss Lawson," he said with a shy smile. "Figured you would want her back." "Thank you, Tommy, for everything. You are a good friend." The young man blushed and tipped his hat, then followed the marshal back toward town. Alone again, Willa and Cade stood in the clearing, the afternoon sun filtering through the pines. "Well," Cade said finally, "that was an interesting day." Willa laughed, slightly hysterical. "That is one way to put it." "Come on," Cade said, his hand warm on her lower back. "Let us get inside. I think we could both use some coffee." Over the next few weeks, life at the cabin settled into a new normal. The marshal sent word that he had spoken to Marcus Webb and made the consequences of further harassment clear. Marcus had apparently taken the warning seriously because there were no more visits, no more threats. Word filtered back through Tommy, who stopped by occasionally with news that Marcus had left the Double R entirely, moving on to another ranch further south. With the immediate threat gone, Willa felt herself finally able to breathe. She and Cade fell into an even easier routine, working together to maintain the cabin and the small homestead. She discovered that she loved the simplicity of mountain life, the rhythm of the seasons, the quiet satisfaction of growing her own food and living off the land. And she discovered that she loved Cade Barrett. It crept up on her gradually, like the changing of seasons. The way her heart lifted when she heard his footsteps on the porch. The way she found excuses to stand close to him, to brush against his arm or shoulder. The way she caught herself watching him when he worked, admiring the play of muscles under his shirt, the competent sureness of his movements. She thought perhaps he felt it too. She caught him looking at her sometimes, his storm-colored eyes soft with something that might have been tenderness. He found reasons to touch her, a hand on her shoulder, fingers brushing hers when he passed her something at the table. He brought her gifts from his hunts, not just meat but small treasures. A perfect pine cone, a blue jay feather, a piece of quartz that sparkled in the sunlight. But neither of them spoke of it. Cade, she suspected, was afraid of pushing her, of making her feel pressured after everything she had been through with Marcus. And Willa did not know how to bring it up, did not know if what she felt was real or just gratitude and proximity. Then came the night of the storm. It rolled in fast, the way storms did in the mountains, turning the sky black and unleashing torrents of rain that hammered against the cabin roof. Thunder shook the walls, and lightning split the sky with blinding white light. Willa lay in her bed on her side of the partition, listening to the storm rage outside, and found she could not sleep. Every crack of thunder made her jump, and the wind howling through the pines sounded almost like voices. "Willa," Cade's voice came from the other side of the blanket partition. "You all right?" "Yes," she called back, then amended, "No, I am not fond of storms." There was a pause then. "Would you like some company, please?" Cade appeared around the partition, carrying an oil lamp that cast flickering shadows across his face. He was barefoot, wearing only his trousers and an undershirt that clung to his broad chest. His hair was loose around his shoulders, and Willa thought he had never looked more handsome. He set the lamp on the shelf and sat on the edge of her bed. "Storms used to bother Sarah too," he said quietly. "I would sit with her until they passed." "Tell me about her," Willa said, scooting over to make room for him. "Tell me about Sarah." So Cade talked, his deep voice low and soothing beneath the sound of the rain. He told her about meeting Sarah at a dance in Denver, about how she had been the prettiest girl there, and he had been terrified to ask her to dance. He told her about their wedding, a simple affair in a small church with just a handful of friends in attendance. He told her about their ranch in Colorado, the horses they raised, the life they had built together. "She sounds wonderful," Willa said when he fell silent. She was. Cade looked down at his hands, calloused and scarred from years of hard work. "I loved her more than I thought it was possible to love another person. When she died, I thought I would die too. Thought maybe I should die, that it was wrong for me to keep living when she could not. But you did not. No, I found the men who killed her and I made them pay. And then I came here to the mountains and I built this cabin and I tried to forget." He looked up at Willa and there was pain in his eyes. "But I could not forget. You do not forget love like that. It stays with you, becomes part of who you are." "I am glad you did not forget her," Willa said softly. "She was part of your life, part of what made you who you are. You should not have to forget that." "Sometimes I feel guilty," Cade admitted, for being alive when she is not, for finding moments of happiness, for— He trailed off, but Willa knew what he had been about to say. For having feelings for me, she finished gently. Cade's eyes widened slightly. You know, I suspected, and I hope you suspected the same about me. Willa reached out and took his hand, her small fingers intertwining with his much larger ones. I have feelings for you, Cade, real feelings, not gratitude, not because you saved me from Marcus, but because of who you are. The way you live, the way you treat me, the way you see me as a person and not as something to be possessed. You have shown me what it means to be respected, to be valued. How could I not fall for you, Willa? Her name was almost a prayer on his lips. I do not deserve you. I am just an old mountain man with too much blood on his hands and not enough softness left in his heart. That is not true, Willa said fiercely. You are kind and gentle and protective. You have taken care of me when you had no obligation to. You have given me a home when I had nowhere else to go. And yes, you have lived a hard life and done hard things, but that does not make you unworthy of love. Love, Cade repeated as though testing the word. Love, Willa confirmed. I love you, Cade Barrett. I know it has only been a few weeks, and maybe that is too fast, but I cannot help how I feel. You have come to mean everything to me. Outside, thunder crashed, making the cabin shake. But inside, in the soft glow of the oil lamp, Cade leaned forward and kissed Willa with a tenderness that took her breath away. His lips were warm and soft, moving against hers with a gentleness that belied his size and strength. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheek, and Willa melted into him, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. The kiss deepened, becoming something more urgent, more desperate. Years of loneliness and pain poured into it from both sides, along with hope and joy, and the dawning realization that perhaps they had both found something neither had expected. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cade rested his forehead against Willa's. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I did not think I could love anyone again after Sarah, but you came into my life like a force of nature, and you made me feel things I thought were dead and buried. You made me want to live again, not just survive. Willa felt tears streaming down her face, but they were good tears, happy tears. So what do we do now? Cade pulled back slightly, his hands framing her face. We build a life together, here in these mountains, away from people who want to tell us how to live. We wake up every morning grateful for another day together. We love each other as hard and as well as we can for as long as we are given. He paused, his eyes searching hers. If that is what you want. It is exactly what I want, Willa said, and kissed him again. They spent the rest of the night tangled together in the bed, talking and kissing and making plans for the future. The storm raged on outside, but inside the cabin, Willa had never felt warmer or safer. When dawn finally broke, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean and bright. Willa woke to find herself wrapped in Cade's arms, his chest rising and falling steadily beneath her cheek. She stayed there for a long time, just listening to his heartbeat, marveling at the fact that this strong, gentle man loved her. Eventually Cade stirred, his eyes opening to find her watching him. Morning, he rumbled, his voice rough with sleep. Good morning, Willa replied, smiling. No regrets, none whatsoever. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. Good. Because I am not letting you go now. I would not dream of trying to leave. They spent the morning in lazy contentment, making breakfast together and talking about their plans. Cade wanted to expand the cabin, add another room and a proper cellar for storage. Willa wanted to plant a bigger garden, maybe get some chickens and a milk cow. They talked about traveling to Prescott to get married properly, about the life they would build together in the mountains. It felt, Willa thought, like the beginning of something beautiful. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn day with golden leaves falling from the aspens, Willa Lawson became Willa Barrett in a small ceremony in Prescott. They had invited Tommy and a few other friends from town, but it was a quiet affair, just the way they both wanted it. Cade wore new clothes for the occasion, though he had refused to cut his hair, and Willa wore a simple dress of blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. They exchanged vows in front of a circuit preacher, promising to love and honor each other for the rest of their days. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Cade kissed her with such passion that several people in the small crowd laughed and cheered. "Mrs. Barrett," Cade murmured against her lips, "I like the sound of that." "So do I, Mr. Barrett, so do I." They spent their wedding night in a hotel in Prescott, a rare luxury, before heading back up into the mountains to their cabin. Winter was coming, and there was work to be done to prepare. That winter was the happiest of Willa's life. She and Cade spent the long, dark evenings by the fire, talking and reading and simply being together. They made love in the big bed with its bearskin cover, learning each other's bodies with patience and tenderness. They worked side by side during the days, chopping wood and tending to the animals and maintaining the cabin against the harsh weather. When spring came, bringing with it the first wildflowers and the return of the birds, Willa discovered she was pregnant. She told Cade over breakfast simply and directly, "We are going to have a baby." Cade dropped his fork. "A baby, are you sure?" "Very sure." Willa smiled at his shocked expression. "Are you happy?" For a moment he just stared at her. Then he was around the table in 2 quick strides, sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around. "Happy? I am terrified and overjoyed and about a dozen other things all at once. A baby, Willa. We are going to have a baby." "I know," she laughed, clinging to his shoulders. "Put me down before you make me dizzy." He set her down gently, then dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Willa ran her fingers through his long hair, her heart so full she thought it might burst. She had come to Arizona territory alone and afraid, fleeing from a man who thought he owned her. And she had found this, a love so deep and true it had healed wounds she had not even known she carried. The baby, a boy, was born in late autumn with the first snow of the season falling softly outside the cabin. Cade delivered him with hands that shook but movements that were sure, and Willa had never seen anything more beautiful than her husband's face when he held their son for the first time. They named him Jacob, after Cade's father, and he had his mother's dark hair and his father's storm-colored eyes. 2 years later, a daughter followed, red-faced and screaming and perfect. They named her Sarah, for the woman who had come before, and Cade cried when he held her, tears of grief and joy mingling together. The cabin expanded over the years, growing to accommodate their growing family. Cade added rooms and a wide front porch where Willa could sit and watch the children play in the clearing. The garden flourished, providing vegetables throughout the summer. The animals multiplied, giving them milk and eggs and meat. They made occasional trips to Seligman for supplies, and word had gotten around about the mountain man and his wife. Some people whispered, suggesting that Willa had run off with Cade in some scandalous affair. But most folks, once they met the couple, could see the genuine love and respect between them. Tommy, who had married a girl from town and started his own ranch, remained a good friend, stopping by every few months to check on them and share news from the valley below. One day, 5 years after Willa had first arrived at the cabin bruised and frightened, she stood on the porch watching Cade teach Jacob how to chop wood. Sarah was at her feet, playing with a rag doll Willa had sewn for her. The sun was warm on her face, and the scent of pine filled the air. This was home. This was family. This was love. Cade looked up from his work and caught her watching. He smiled, that rare, beautiful smile he saved just for her, and Willa felt the familiar flutter in her chest that she had felt since the beginning. "What are you thinking about?" he called out. "How lucky I am," she called back. "How lucky we both are." That night, after the children were asleep and they lay together in their bed, Cade pulled Willa close. "Do you ever think about what your life would have been like if you had not come to Arizona?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," Willa admitted, "but I cannot imagine it any other way now. Everything I went through, all the fear and pain and uncertainty, it led me here, to you, to this life, and I would not change a single moment of it, even Marcus Webb, even him. Because he reminded me that I belonged only to myself and that I had the right to choose my own path. And I chose this. I chose you. I chose us." Cade kissed her temple, his arms tightening around her. "Best choice you ever made." "Best choice we both made," Willa corrected. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Inside the cabin, two people who had both known loss and pain lay wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the love they had found in the most unexpected of places. Years passed. Jacob grew into a strong young man who inherited his father's size and his mother's quick mind. Sarah became a beauty with a fierce, independent streak that reminded Cade of Willa. Two more children followed, twin boys who kept their parents on their toes with their endless energy and mischief. The cabin became a home, warm and full of life and laughter. Neighbors, few and far between in the mountains, knew they could always find a welcome at the Barrett place. Willa's cooking became legendary in the small community, and Cade's reputation as a fair and honest man grew. One summer evening, when Willa was in her late 40s and Cade was graying at the temples, they sat together on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. Their children were grown now, Jacob running his own trap line further up in the mountains, Sarah married to a rancher from Prescott, and the twins working as scouts for the cavalry. "You ever miss it?" Cade asked. "The life you might have had if you had stayed in Kansas?" "Married some respectable man, lived in a town with neighbors close by," Willa laughed, the sound rich and genuine. "Not for a single moment. This life, our life, it has been everything I never knew I wanted. You gave me freedom, Cade. Freedom to be myself, to make my own choices, to love on my own terms. That is worth more than all the respectability in the world." "You gave me something too," Cade said, taking her hand in his much larger one. "You gave me a reason to live again. After Sarah died, I thought my life was over. I was just going through the motions, existing but not really living. Then you rode up to my cabin on a borrowed horse, and everything changed. You reminded me that it was possible to love again, to build again, to hope again." Willa squeezed his hand, tears gathering in her eyes. "We saved each other." "Yes," Cade agreed. "We did." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the forest, an owl hooted, and the evening breeze carried the scent of pine and earth and home. "You remember that first night?" Willa asked. "When the storm came and you sat with me." "I remember everything about you," Cade said. "Every moment. From the first time I saw you in the general store standing up to that bastard Foreman, to the way you looked when you rode up to my cabin asking for help, to the way your eyes lit up when you told me you were pregnant with Jacob. I remember all of it." "Good," Willa said, leaning her head against his broad shoulder. "Because I want to remember too. I want to remember all the beautiful moments we have had together, all the times we chose love even when it would have been easier to choose fear. I want to remember the life we built, just the two of us against the world. Not just the two of us, Cade corrected gently. We had help. Tommy and the marshal who made Webb back off, and all the friends we have made over the years. We did not do this alone. No, Willa agreed. But we did it together, and that made all the difference. As the last light faded from the sky and the stars blazed overhead in the clear mountain air, Willa felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. Her life had not been easy. There had been hardship and loss, fear and pain. But there had also been love, deep and true and lasting. There had been joy in the simple moments, satisfaction in hard work, and the profound happiness that came from building a life with someone who truly saw and valued you. She had come to Arizona territory running from a man who thought he could claim her as his own. And she had found a man who reminded her and everyone else that she belonged only to herself, that her heart was hers to give, not something to be taken. And she had given it freely to Cade Barrett, the mountain man with storm-colored eyes and gentle hands, who had loved her fiercely and completely for all their days together. Years later, when they were both old and gray, their children and grandchildren gathered around them, Cade and Willa would sit on that same porch and tell the story of how they met. The young ones would listen wide-eyed to the tale of the foreman who tried to claim Willa as his own, and the mountain man who reminded everyone that she belonged only to herself. But the best part of the story, the part that made Willa's heart swell even decades later, was not the dramatic confrontation or the romantic rescue. It was what came after. It was the quiet building of a life together. It was the ordinary moments that became extraordinary simply because they shared them. It was waking up every morning next to someone who loved and respected you, and going to bed every night grateful for another day together. It was, quite simply, a love story. Not the kind told in dime novels with grand gestures and dramatic declarations, but the real kind, built on respect and partnership, and the daily choice to love each other well. When Cade passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73, Willa held his hand and whispered thank you for giving her a lifetime of love. She had loved him first, and she had loved him last, and she had loved him for all the years in between. She followed him 3 years later, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last words a whispered, "I am coming, Cade." They buried her next to him on the mountain they had both loved, under the tall pines with a view of the valley below. The headstones were simple, just their names and the words beloved husband and beloved wife. But those who knew them, who had seen the love they shared, knew that those simple words encompassed an entire world. A world where a woman had claimed her own freedom and a man had honored it. A world where love was chosen freely and given generously. A world where two broken people had found each other and become whole. It was a world worth remembering, worth celebrating, worth passing down through the generations as a reminder that real love, the kind that lasts, is built on respect and partnership, and the fundamental belief that every person has the right to choose their own path. Willa Lawson had chosen her path. She had chosen freedom, dignity, and love on her own terms, and in doing so, she had found everything she had never known she was looking for, and that was the best ending of all.